Each student will make at least 1 year's growth in reading and will meet all grade level expectations and will develop a sense of agency, enabling them to become independent learners. That, of course, is our vision. It's our North Star. So today, as you watch and interact with this presentation, you're going to learn how our commitment to reading and vocabulary will ensure the success of each student. We're going to provide clarity around our expectations for vocabulary instruction in all classes. We're going to see how the Frayer model fits in and how it helps us better understand and select the words to teach using the Frayer model and how to teach other words as well. So when asked, why are we learning this? Why are we doing this? We will say, we know it's important that all teachers integrate vocabulary instruction in all classes. And when asked what you're learning, you'll answer how to select vocabulary words for the Frayer model, how to use the Frayer model, and other ways to teach vocabulary. As I said, our expectations are grounded in our collaborative instructional mission. We know and research confirms that vocabulary development is closely related to reading ability. As a matter of fact, it is a great predictor of reading ability. However, reading by itself does not ensure vocabulary development. That's where you come in. Instruction is necessary. So today, we're going to find out how to provide students with that vital instruction. Vocabulary simply is the ability to understand words and their meanings and to be able to use those across many different contexts. It's important to know where your students are and what words you're going to have to teach them. Let's look now at how to select appropriate vocabulary words. Tier 1 words are the basic vocabulary words. Meanwhile, Tier 2 words, where we're going to focus our attention, are the high frequency words. Often they have multiple meanings. These are the words that are most important for you to provide direct instruction because they're good indicators of ability to translate what you're teaching into what students are actually learning. Tier 3 words, these are the low frequency words, and they're usually academic or content specific, meaning their usage is much narrower. Now, obviously, the needs of our student vary greatly by readiness, by grade level, and by subject. But solid vocabulary instruction is necessary and remarkably similar regardless if you're in first grade or in eighth grade, and regardless of what subject you're teaching. Let's start off with how to select words for intensive instruction. When we refer to intensive instruction, we're referring to words that you are going to use the Frayer model for. You will also then need to provide them with multiple opportunities to learn and interact and use those words. Educational expert Robert Marzano makes the following recommendation. Select about 7 words per unit. These words should be relevant to what students need to learn. And some of the other characteristics of these are that they're used within the unit and across multiple units. They're directly related to content standards. The content in the words would be difficult to understand without sufficient background or contextual support, and they have a logical relationship to other words. Now, fortunately, the Prince William County Planning Guides have identified Tier 2 and Tier 3 words. So let's take a look at some actual words that we've provided. First, we're going to look at 4th grade astronomy unit. Now, as you look at this, you'll notice that some of the words are starred or asterisked. That means that the county has identified these as vital. Now, for this unit, I, however, have decided to use the words in red as part of the Frayer model and direct instruction. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't expect the students to know words like solar system, planet, earth, seasons, but I know that through my instructional process, we're going to nail these words and we're going to build upon them. But the red words are the words that I'm going to focus on purposefully to front load the instruction for these words. And I know that these words also can be used across many different contexts. Now, for the other words, those words that are starred that are not red, it's very possible as a means of formative assessment, I am going to use the Frayer model to check the student's understanding. Now let's look at another, the middle school social studies unit here. They're broken down a little differently. They actually list the words as tier 2 or tier 3. Usually, again, we're going to focus on tier 2 words. Let's look at them in a little bit more detail. Right off the bat, I've removed several tier 3 words. I notice also a lot of overlap between other tier 3 words and those in tier 2. So I'm going to give a pre-assessment. And this pre-assessment is going to help me identify which words my students know and which word my students don't know. And I notice they know immigrant, resource, product, and market. Now I'm going to still focus on these words, but I won't necessarily teach them as intensively. I also know that I can teach rural as an antonym for urban, 2 for the price of 1. So I'll teach industrialization through industry or industry through industrialization. So I have my words for intensive instruction before I begin my unit. Sure, that pre-assessment was very helpful. And we know that pre-assessing has many, many advantages. In addition to saving time and not teaching redundant information, you know that some research suggests that over a third of what we teach the students already know. When we talk about using class time for valuable purpose, there's a value for pre-assessment. It also helps provide students with a roadmap. This is what we are going to learn. This helps with our goal of students becoming independent learners. So there are many ways to pre-assess. Unfortunately, they most always can be used later in the learning process as well. For example, fill in the blank can be used as a pre-assessment, and then you can use that exact same fill in the blank as a formative assessment for some or for all students. Same thing with the KWL. What do I know? What do I want to know? What do I wonder? And what have I learned? Perhaps providing a word bank where the students would fill this in at the beginning would also help you determine what vocabulary knowledge they have. A concept map or a web diagram can be provided for students to complete before, during, and after the unit with a focus on what the essential understandings are as that centerpiece or that essential question. As a matter of fact, this is a strategy straight out of Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe's Understanding by Design frameworks. Finally, let's look at a way for students to assess their own knowledge. This is a great strategy because, again, it's quick, it's easy, but it also helps students see where they are, start their growth, and focus on what matters as they go through, helping them become independent learners, meaning they become responsible for their learning because they know what they need to know and because they can act upon it. But they can only do that when we provide them with that opportunity. So at this point, I hope you have a better understanding of how to select vocabulary words for intensive instruction and how to determine which words will require less intensive instruction. Let's see how I did at teaching. How would you complete this sentence stem? So here's a couple possible ways to complete that sentence stem. We know that we can't rely solely on the pacing guides. As students, we'll come across rich text and new vocabulary as they read, as they watch a video, or as they listen to you, or they listen to peers. Now, a student's maximum level of reading comprehension is determined by their knowledge of the words. That's why word knowledge and vocabulary are so important. Vocabulary, word knowledge allows students to comprehend text, videos, lessons, etc. For this reason, and this reason only, if we were to say there's one reason, is why it's so important for all teachers to integrate vocabulary and literary instruction into their classes. Now, we're going to use the Frayer model for all of those essential words that we just identified. We'll select another strategy for other vocabulary. Let's look at how we will explicitly teach and help students contextualize the essential words and other research-based strategies for vocabulary acquisition. Now, Robert Marzano recommends 6 steps for students to maximum their vocabulary knowledge. The first step is to provide a description, an explanation, or an example. Introduce the new word, not just by reading its dictionary definition, and surely don't have the students just look up the dictionary definition, but find ways to engage them with explanations, with vivid examples, real world scenarios. Make sure the context clearly demonstrates the word's meaning and its application. Number 2, ask students to restate it in their own words. Encourage the students to actively engage with the new word. Ask them to explain it in their own language. This also will help you gauge an understanding of what they know and identify right off the bat any misconceptions that they have. Marzano's third step is to construct a visual representation. Students create a drawing, a mind map, a symbol, something that visually represents the word's meaning. This reinforces the understanding through non-linguistic means. It builds those neural pathways and strengthens memory to attention. Fourth, deepen the knowledge through the activities. Provide activities that help students further explore the nuances of the word and its usage in many different contexts. And this could involve vocabulary notebooks, sentence writing exercises, interactive games. Fifth step for Marzano is to facilitate discussion. Are the students using this in writing? Are the students using this in speaking? The students need the opportunity, multiple opportunities, to discuss the new word with each other. Through this peer interaction, they're going to clarify their understanding. They might gain different perspectives. They're going to practice using the word in conversation. This is where our structured conversations and structured writing tasks and sentence stems play a huge, huge role. And then finally, what are some vocabulary games that you can play? Make learning fun and engaging. Incorporate vocabulary games. And this is not just the lower level types of games that we can necessarily do online. Things like charades or crossword puzzles or word association activities can also be used. This provides that low pressure environment for practicing and solidifying these meanings. Now recognize that steps 4, 5, and 6, they're not necessarily sequential. They should be going continually on throughout the learning process. So we're constantly deepening their knowledge through activities. We're constantly giving them opportunities to use the word in discussion. And then we're mixing in games as appropriate. So let's see how this fits with the Frayer model. Now, again, the Frayer model does not necessarily need to be a scripted process. But first, what you're going to do is you're going to provide the students with that definition. And this might be a more technical definition, and it requires some unpacking, and that's fine. Model how to unpack the word to make it understandable for the students. This is a good strategy, just like a think aloud. Then work with your students to create a student-friendly version for them to write down in their required vocabulary notebook. These are steps 1 and 2 of Marzano's 6 steps. Provide the vocabulary word for students to realize the word in their own language. Next, have the students create a visual representation or an other way to deepen their understanding. This could be Latin roots, Greek roots, visuals, anything along those lines. Then students will complete the characteristics, examples, and non-examples of the Frayer model. And you'll notice what we're doing. We're using that gradual release of responsibility model here. You know your students, you know their needs. It's important that we give students the opportunity throughout this process to interact with the word early on, and so they can begin to form that deeper understanding of the word. Share then with partners a structured conversation where they are looking at how they run the examples, the non-examples, and their drawings. These are steps 3, 4, and 5, and 6 in Marzano's steps. We just didn't get to the game portion. But now we know students have the foundational knowledge. They have the words in their digital notebooks. They can reference back to them throughout the learning. Make sure the students are referencing back to them without their learning. This is an important part. Refer back to your notebooks. That way they see the importance of what they're doing. Because again, students need multiple opportunities to interact with each word because knowing the word and its usage is how we build foundational knowledge. Let's go through an example together. All right, you ready? We're going to go through the word agriculture. All right, so I might start off at saying agriculture as a teacher. I'm playing the role of the teacher now. All right, and I'm going to introduce you to one of my students. Okay, so this is Ed DeSock, and I have another student. This is John White Crew. All right, let's say the word together. Agriculture. Agriculture. Now, agriculture, teacher talk, is the science or occupation of cultivating the soil, producing crops, and raising livestock. I've noticed that's a pretty cool definition. Teacher, what's a better way of saying agriculture? Farming. Yes, I think that's a great way to say it. Farming is not just about crops. We have dairy farms, for example, where they raise cows and milk. But let's go ahead and write down farming as our definition for agriculture. What other types of agricultural activities can you think of? Go ahead and put them in the chat. Oh, I see lots of great activities. Maple syrup, alpaca, sheep, poultry, fish. I wouldn't have thought of some of those. There is some helpful information. Here's some more information. Agri means field, and culture means to take care of. We talk about taking care of each other and having a good classroom culture. So I'm going to give you a minute now to complete the Frayer model. Go ahead and complete your drawing. Some examples, we've already come up with them. We heard alpaca and sheep farming and poultry farming and fish farming. I would not have thought of fish farming. Then I'm going to ask you to share with a partner. So go ahead and do that individually. All right, I've opened up breakout rooms and I want you to share your examples and your non-examples in your drawing. I got a sentence stem that I want you to use. Here's the sentence stem. I drew blank, which is an example of agriculture because blank. Normally I would display them. Remember, we're constantly learning from our classmates, so we want you to add to your Frayer model. My examples were livestock, grains, and orchard. My examples were grain, soybean, and rice. My non-examples were factories in urban areas. I didn't have any non-examples. Let me write that down. What was it again? Factories in urban areas. What did you draw? I drew wheat, which is an example of agriculture because people grow wheat for flour. I drew a tractor, which is an example of agriculture because farmers use tractors. The breakout room closes. Great. Ed, can you share? Yeah, we drew a wheat and we drew a tractor because those are both examples of agriculture. So now remember, going back to the actual presentation, and we can go through some of these real quickly. The Frayer model is for us to go deeper with our students. We're investing some time to go into this process because these are indeed essential words. When we use the Frayer model with intentionality and we're purposefully selecting the words, students will begin to see why we're using the Frayer model. It's also important, however, that we explain why we're using the Frayer model as well, to build vocabulary, to build conceptual knowledge, and to provide students with required background information. So that's the Frayer model, which we're using for those high need intensive words. But what about the non-intensive words? We still have to provide instruction for those vocabulary words. These context clues only work well if you're one, familiar with the subject, two, you're a good reader. And it usually requires both. It's true that most vocabulary is acquired incidentally through indirect exposure to words. But with that in mind, we have to realize that we have a responsibility to engage our students in that rich oral language experiences, reading, discussing, etc. The volume and quality of those experiences, the reading, the writing, the listening, are important. Extensive reading gives students the repeated or multiple exposures to the words and how those words fit in rich context to the vocabulary. So let's look at some rich research-based ways to provide vocabulary instruction. First, non-linguistic representations. Now, these can be done by both the students and by the teachers. Here's how it might look. I've chosen some of those words from the astronomy unit. Sorry, it's a little blurry. Sketch the object when it's concrete, when it's easy to do. Sketch a symbol if it's more abstract, things like Fahrenheit here. Sketch an example of the term from abstract words. The phases of the moon is what you're seeing there. Sketch a cartoon or vignette if the term is more abstract, and maybe a thought or a speech bubble can help students better understand that word. You can also use a graphic to help better understand the word. These non-linguistic ideas, yeah, they can be part of the Frayer Model, or they can be used to annotate readings or take notes, among other ideas. The next strategy is to teach prior to and during reading. This is the case for all readings. It doesn't matter what you're reading. So step one, select a word you're going to read aloud. Then do a student-friendly definition. Then introduce the word prior to reading. Now you'll notice prior to or during, either way, you have to have these words purposefully chosen in advance. These are sometimes going to be words that maybe are not showing up in a PWCS unit guide. So this is pre-reading, pre-watching a video that you're going to see that maybe has a word that's important, not necessarily vital, but important. Then step four, you're going to teach the word meaning when you encounter them during the reading or before the reading. All right, so we're going to go back to our class. Getting my socks on. All right, class, you ready? So I've identified two words, saunter and drench. I come up with definitions to share before the class begins. That's my instructional clarity. That's my job as a teacher. Okay? So now here's the script the teacher would say. When we read the story, I want you to listen for these new words. Repeat after me. Everyone unmute. Sauntering. Sauntering. Wrench. Wrench. All right. Vocabulary stars. When you hear these words, I want you to raise your hand. So he went sauntering down the street. Oh, good. I see many of you raised your hands. What word did you hear? Sauntering. Yes, sauntering. So sauntering down this, he went sauntering down the street. Sauntering means walking. So he went walking down the street. Let's say sauntering together one more time. Sauntering. With scholars, sauntering means walking. We would then continue with the reading. All right. Now the next one is going to be, the next one is going to be the word embark. Okay. So now here's the teacher on this one. The first word is embark. Don't write anything, but I want you to unmute. Read the word and the definition with me. 3, 2, 1, go. Embark means begin a journey. All right, teacher. It can also mean to use a vehicle to go someplace. Let's read example 1 and go. We have a new mission to embark on as we try to make healthcare more affordable. Teacher, this isn't a physical journey. We're not going anywhere, but it is a destination. Let's read the second. Read and go. It's always wise to be prepared before you embark on a hike. So there we see embark, and it is a physical journey. All right, I want you to get your thumbs ready. You're going to go thumbs up or thumbs down. Could you say he is embarking on a new career as an actor? How about, can you say the boy stole candy from the store? Could we say the young student embarked the candy? But the cruise passenger embarked on a 3-week stint at sea. All right, class, it seems like you got those right. Now, in the chat, I want you to complete this sentence using the sentence stem that I provided. What are your predictions? How do you think the word embark might be used in the story we're about to read about Harriet Tubman? She, of course, was the leader of the Underground Railroad. Let's see how you think embark might be used. All right, so now in doing this, we've pre taught a word that is essential to the understanding of the story. This wasn't a word embark that was just going to be incidentally come across. It also wasn't a word that was necessary for us to go through in the Frayer model. But in our professional opinion, it did require more than just providing a definition as we read. Now, we've also modeled a couple reading strategies. We've made a prediction, for example, which is important. We've also introduced some other words. Just orally, we use words like stint. That's a great way to, again, use for vocabulary, stretch your students when you're talking orally. We should always ensure that students are knowledgeable and understanding our learning intentions as well. If either is unclear, the intention or the success criteria, how can we expect our students to answer, what am I learning today and how will I know if I've learned it? A great scaffolding technique that takes very little time benefits all students and can annotate the learning intention success criteria. Here is a real math success criteria from middle school. Look at all the vocabulary words. Does each student know simplify, expressions, order of operation, properties, real numbers? If they don't know any one of those, they're going to have trouble understanding the learning standard. So let's look at how we could annotate it. Simplify is another way to say solving a math problem. When we say simplify an expression, students, you're basically saying write it in the simplest way possible. 15 over 30 is half, or 1 over 2. Meanwhile, an expression has two numbers and one operation. So 8 plus 5 is addition. Because it has that addition and two numbers, it is an expression. And then you would do the same for orders of operation and properties and real numbers. Now, to ensure the students are using the vocabulary, remember step 5 in Marzano steps, students are discussing. We can use sentence stems when providing students with structured reading or writing opportunities. Remember, one of our expectations is at least 3 times per class period, every 45 minutes, so every 15 minutes, students should be interacting with the content and peers through a structured conversation or structured writing. You look at sentence stems, what do? They provide gradually increasing the student's usage of the academic language. When we're targeted, specific, provide multiple opportunities for students to use that academic language, we're setting high expectations for our students. We're building their literacy skills. We're changing the way they talk. This opens up the door for our students. This raises achievement. This is an equity issue. Vocabulary sentence stems don't need to be a DOK1. We can use things like these with comparing and contrasting, creating analogies, metaphors, similes. All of these can be part of a vocabulary sentence stem that raises that DOK as well, setting high expectations for our students. We should also be integrating vocabulary as part of our language objectives. Because so vocabulary, as we know, is so integral to understanding. It's foundational. When we craft a language objective, we should be mindful of how we include vocabulary, which enables us to link a language objective with the content objective. Language objective and content objective. An easy sentence stem to use here. If students will blank by content area connection using blank. Okay, so let's look at some of these examples. If you look at the two examples, the I will explain, you'll notice that we're requiring students to use academic vocabulary. This ensures some depth in their answers. That's what we want, right? We want depth in answers. And it provides us as well with the means to check for understanding. Yep, the first language objective is a structured writing task. What's the second one? A structured conversation. All we now need to do is create a sentence stem to ensure that students can use the necessary rich vocabulary, the academic vocabulary. Now, as we're wrapping up today's presentation, I want to thank you for your time because this was a lengthy one. Oh. But I'm sure some of you are asking about how do I grade this? So I'm not going to give you an answer there. That's up to you to figure out. You're the professional. But I encourage you to think about grading and ask yourself, how will grading advance the student's knowledge? Being mindful of two things. Vocabulary is foundational, and we know that often it can be the lower DOK. So what are some tips? Our first tip is explicit instruction and multiple opportunities for students to respond can increase student engagement. The sentence stems, structured conversations, the use of strong vocabulary, this improves student engagement. When we do things like annotate the learning objectives, it increases engagement because the students understand what am I learning? How will I demonstrate my learning? It's providing a roadmap for it. Allow students to use the academic language. Require the students to use the academic language through structured writing and structured conversations. This enables you as well to immediately check for their understanding. Students also, you'll notice through some of those things that we did, students need the opportunity to say the word as well. And again, that's going to create some neural connections. This doesn't need to be formulaic. Develop a routine that works for you and your students. All right, so if we were to sum it all up, to wrap it up, remember, explicit instruction means that teachers introduce new words and their meanings directly. This is the first part of that gradual release of responsibility. It's the I as a teacher do. We don't want to assume or infer students know what the words mean. That's where pre-assessment can come in. Provide definitions using that clear and consistent language. Then we start to shift the responsibility towards them by allowing them to use visual and vocabulary strategies. Model how the words can be used in different contexts, like I did with that word embark. Use the Frayer model. We have to use the Frayer model for essential words. Our students are becoming experts on the Frayer model. Then support those with Marzano's 6 steps, providing a framework for instruction. Extend the vocabulary instruction to go beyond providing a definition. Use it through the initial context to lead to a greater depth of word learning. And when we do these things, we know we're going to go back to our instructional vision that all students will make at least 1 year's growth in reading, which we know is an important aspect for all students to be successful. And we know that's an equity issue as well. And for students to become independent learners, because they are going to be able to see how their vocabulary is improving. Thank you for your time. Let us know if you have any questions. We're here to support you and help you.